Hi, I'm Stacy, and I'm so glad you're here with me on Watercolor Together. I made a decision on July 1st that I would attempt to post 31 tutorials in 31 days for World Watercolor Month. And this is something that's pretty new to me. I haven't done anything like this before. I managed to get 31 videos done in 32 days. I was one day late on the last video, but I'm really excited to have accomplished that. And now I get to think about what kind of content do I think will be good to put out in YouTube. I know there are so many artists who are making videos, and I enjoy a lot of tutorials. I like watching other artists paint. I learn from that, and so this channel I really think about learning and growing together. I'd love it to be a community. And so now that World Watercolor Month is over, I think the first thing I want to do is make a beginner series for somebody who's just starting watercolor. When I reflect back on when I started, it was challenging to find. I could find a lot of great tutorials, a tutorial for painting one thing here, another thing here, but it wasn't a cohesive set of videos that helped me make sure that I was starting off in the right direction and building some foundational skills. So that's the approach I'm going to take. And so once a week, I'm going to release a video that goes through more in like a course. So think about if you were signing up for a course that took place once a week, and then you do some practicing on your own, and then you come back the next week and you learn the next thing, and so that you are progressing your skill set. So that's the approach that I'm going to take. And so this first video is going to be about the supplies and materials you need. So this is really geared for a beginner who's just starting out with watercolor. And then the other set of videos I think I'm going to make weekly is going to be, I really enjoy painting on painting landscapes. And so this will be more like a paint along, somebody who has a bit more experience, who's already done some watercolor painting. I do, I'll kind of describe the steps that I'm taking, and you can paint along with me. So we're going to start this video with supplies. I do think that I'm going to break it into two videos because I'm going to do a general overview, and then I'm going to post a second video that goes into specific colors in a palette. And that'll be why I'm choosing the colors that I'm choosing, and I'm going to break it down. I use a palette of 24 colors. I've spent the last 3 years really swapping things in and out and really developing the palette that I use now, and I'm really, really happy with the palette I have now. And so I'm going to talk about the colors, the 24 colors that I have, but then also break down if I were only going to buy 9 tubes of paint, or if I were only going to have a palette of 12 or 15 or 18. And that way, if you don't have professional watercolors but you want to start collecting them, this might be a good place to start. So and then the last thing I'm going to say about supplies is that I tend to have a viewpoint of quality over quantity. I think some really high quality supplies, but fewer of them, are better than having a lot of supplies that end up not getting used. So sometimes it's better to spend a little more in the beginning, but use it for a long time. We're going to have some options, but that's just my general approach. All right, so I'm going to turn the camera around, and we'll look at my art table and see what I have laid out there. I'm going to kind of stand back here and pan around. The basics, of course, are paper, paintbrushes, and paint. And we're going to talk about each of those categories in a little more depth. But the things that we don't really need to talk about too much are water jars. Now, I like to set mine up with this little plastic tray. This came from IKEA, but you can get trays at the dollar store or the resale shop, wherever. And this just protects my table surface because the bottom of these jars tend to get wet. And then I like 2 water jars. I like for my water jars to be clear because then I can see as when I need to change my water. And then the other thing is that I like a wide mouth jar so that's easy for me to swish my brush in. And then I use this little tray with sponge because I can, after I rinse my brush, I can dab my brush on the sponge to pull a little water out if I want to. And that cuts down on my paper towel usage. And then a spray bottle for spritzing down paints. when you're going to begin painting. And then sometimes I use this on my paper in order to create some interesting effects if I'm doing some wet on wet techniques, or I just want to spritz down part of my paper and charge some paint in. And then I do have a roll of paper towels back here. Paper towels are important. You can use a rag as well if you want to cut down on your paper towel use. I do keep a kitchen towel close by, partly if I have a spill, then I can grab it and sop it up, but I also use this as a prop underneath of my paper or boards. I learned that from another YouTuber and I thought it worked really well. Okay, so then these are some of the miscellaneous things. Roll of tape. You're going to need tape to tape your paint down. I really enjoy having a color wheel. I recommend that you get a color wheel. They are only a few dollars. I think like less than $5. And you can get them at the big box stores, big box craft stores. You can also order them online. You can make your own, but it's kind of nice to have a pre-made color wheel because there's usually some extra information. And like on the back, this talks a little bit about color theory and the way that you can develop different kinds of color palettes, whether it's a triadic or split complementary, things like that. Okay, I have a little jar of salt because I use this to make some interesting textures sometimes. And then a drawing pencil. You can use any kind of pencil. I like these mechanical style pencils, but really whatever pencil you're comfortable with works. And then this is a kneaded eraser. You can get a kneaded eraser for usually less than $2. I get them at my art store, but you can order them online as well. This is how you want to lighten up your lines or erase on watercolor paper because a traditional regular eraser will damage the surface of your paper. So you can't use just a regular eraser. You're really going to need one of these. And then this is fun to have. This is a Pigma Micron pen, and this is a size 1. If you want to do some fine line work, either before you wash your watercolor in or after, that's what this is really great for. And I think, and then of course my kitchen towel I talked about. So I'm going to pop the camera up in the tripod and then go over those paper, paint, and paint brushes because those I think you need a bit more information on. So we'll go a little farther in depth with that. But you can see this is just my overview of my table, and this is all you really need to get started. Okay, let's talk about paper first. You really need to work on watercolor paper even if you are a very beginner because regular like printer paper or sketchbook paper, it just doesn't hold the water. It's too thin. And watercolor paper has something called sizing in it that helps the paints interact with the paper better. There are varying qualities of paper. I'm a pretty big advocate for using 100% cotton paper. I'll tell you that for the first year that I was painting with watercolors, I did not. I used the cheapest paper that was watercolor paper that I could find. So I use a lot of these Canson XL watercolor sketchbooks. These are not bad. It's just that it is really hard to do some techniques on what's called cellulose paper. So this inexpensive paper is cellulose. It means it's made with tree pulp. And so it just doesn't handle the water very well. And the other thing that's really fascinating is that because it doesn't handle the water well, the pigment sort of fades out. It's really difficult to get very deep values on cellulose paper. It's not that it can't be done, it's just a lot harder. And so if you're just starting and you're working on this inexpensive watercolor paper, you're making your progress and your learning more difficult. And so it's, I think, often hard to justify buying expensive paper when you're a beginner, but this is an area where if you buy that expensive paper, your progress is actually going to be faster because you're working on a paper that is works better with the medium. So these watercolor journals, they're good for just like quick sketches. I use them. I just recently did I'll use it for like a little value sketch. I can't even find one. Okay, so like this is a painting I did. This is a good example. I did this because I was just doing kind of a study, but I've got really weird blooms. I had a very hard time getting good value in here. My yellows did some funky things. So like overall, this painting just didn't turn out very well on here, but then I painted it on better paper and it was a lot more successful. I wish I had that close by to show you, but I don't. So that'll have to be another day. Anyway, you can do like little practice things like this are really nice in here. I've done some studies. This is another good example, right? Like to go in and just do a kind of I wanted to paint some mums, some chrysanthemums, and so I did some studies here, and then I took it to my butter paper later. So these are really nice for that, but just understand that if this is the only paper you're working on, then you're going to have a hard time progressing. And when you do look for a sketchbook, make sure that it's at least 140 pound. And what that refers to is the weight of the paper, and so it's like the thickness or how stiff it is. So 140 pound is kind of the minimum for watercolor. You can find 90 pound paper, but it's gonna wrinkle really fast. It's gonna get all wavy, and then when the paper gets wavy, it's harder to manage your water because it wants to puddle, and it's easier to get water blooms. It's harder to charge in color, things like that. So, all right, that's my little like, please buy good paper, even if you feel like you're not worth it. You are worth good paper. And even if you are a very beginner, it's still a good idea to buy good paper. So I'm gonna give you an option. This is Meaden's watercolor paper. It is 100% cotton. It's not it's a good paper. It's not, I would consider this student grade as opposed to artist grade. But when you work on this, it's going to handle your washes much better than something like this would, or even like other big box generic watercolor pads that are made with cellulose. So unless it says 100% cotton, assume it's made with tree pulp, and it's just not going to handle the paint and water very well. Now, what's nice about this watercolor pad, you can order it online. I can't remember what the price was, but it really wasn't bad. I think it was less than $20, and you get 30 sheets of paper. They're 10 by 7, which is really manageable for when you're new. I think sometimes painting smaller when you're new is a little less intimidating. And then the other thing that I really like about this is it gives you a sampling of 3 different types of paper so that you can decide what you like. One is a rough texture, which means that there's like a texture to the surface of the paper, and the rough, it means that it's like a little rougher, it's a little bumpier. So when you paint and you want to do dry brushing techniques, that paint wants to skip over and it creates more texture in your painting. So that can be really nice for loose style paintings or landscape paintings. And then cold press, which is what I usually work on. Like 90% of the time I'm working on cold press. Sometimes I work on rough. Cold press is similar to rough, but the texture is just a bit smoother. So there's still some tooth to the paper, and you can still get some texture. It's just not as textured as rough. And then the other kind of paper that you get in this pad is hot press, and hot press is really smooth. So it handles the paint pretty differently than cold press or rough. But this is a great pad because you can try all 3 and kind of see what it is that you like. This is 140 pounds. This GM 300, this is a European measurement, or maybe the rest of the world uses that measurement, I don't know, but we use pounds. And so this is equal to 140 pounds. Okay, so now we're gonna go up to the next level paper. This paper I started using after about a year of working with watercolors. I ordered one of these because I saw a review online and I thought, I'm gonna try that out. I got it on Amazon. I wished I had started using this much earlier because this is, it just handles the paint and the water so well. And so the things that when I was painting in this style paper, I was getting so frustrated because I felt like it was me, that I just couldn't master some of these techniques. And then when I went to this higher quality paper, I realized that part of my problem was that I was using cellulose paper. So that's why I really advocate for beginners to get good paper to start with. This Academy watercolor paper pad, there are 20 sheets and it comes in a block. You can get different sizes. This is the 12 by 8, but they do make smaller sizes if you want to save a little bit more money and get a smaller size. That's a good way to have a little savings. And what it means by block is that the paper is glued down on all 4 sides so that you can paint directly on this, and it's like it's pre-stretched. You don't have to tape it down. So the paper is already glued down, and then after you finish your painting, there's this little spot, like this little slot where there's no glue, and you just stick a palette knife in between, and you just kind of run that palette knife on all 4 sides to release the paper from the pad. I really like working in blocks because then I don't have to have a board that I tape down to. And if I have multiple paintings happening at once, then I have multiple of these blocks, because sometimes I like to work in stages, and so this lets me do that without having to have all these like big boards that my paintings are taped down to. Okay, so then if we go up in quality, this is, I should say this is made by Bauhaus. This is a bao hong paper. I really, really love bao hong paper. And so this is also bao hong, but this is artist grade. The differences between the Academy and the artist are not tremendous. And so I actually, I don't want to, I'm not going to say that I prefer this, because what I do think this does a little bit better with lifting and scrubbing, in keeping the surface of the paper won't get damaged. And so you can do some scrubbing and lifting on this paper, but you just have to be a little bit careful, because if you do too much, it can damage the surface. And I feel like maybe this paper is a little bit more forgiving of scrubbing and lifting. But other than that, I don't see a tremendous difference. This paper is a bit more expensive. I think it's like $4 or $5 more for a pad of the artist versus the Academy. The Academy paper is really good paper, so you're just fine to order the Academy. You don't necessarily need the artist version. And then I have under here this, this is the kind of paper to avoid. This is like $9 for a pad of 15 sheets, whereas you're going to pay $20 or $22 for a pad of 20 sheets. So there is a, like, this is twice as expensive. But the reality is that this paper is really, really difficult to work with. This is all cellulose. It comes in a pad instead of a block. So you have to take each sheet out and then tape it down to something. The only thing I use these for are like doing swatch cards like this. I don't want to use my good paper to make a swatch card. So oftentimes I'm using cheaper paper to do swatches, or if I'm just messing around. This is also good for like doing a value study, things like that. And most big box craft stores have some version of their own watercolor paper. It's exclusively cellulose paper as far as I know, which is wood pulp. All right, so that's enough about paper. Let's talk about paintbrushes. This is my little brush bucket, and these are the brushes that I use. Brushes are very, very personal, and you're not really going to know what you like for brushes until after you've been painting for a little while. This is my third set of brushes, and I'm probably stuck here. I mean, I love these so much that I don't know that I'll need to feel like I need to find another set of brushes. And so what I started with is actually excellent quality brushes. I had Winsor Newton 7 series brushes, which are very, very expensive. They're more expensive than the set that I love the most. And I would not recommend that any beginner go out and buy Winsor Newton 7 series brushes. I just happen to have some of their smaller brushes that was in my collection because it came as a gift a long time ago. And so when I started painting watercolor more seriously, I went out and I bought this size 5 7 series brush, and I do really love it. It is a great brush. And then I realized these are so expensive and I wanted to add to my collection, so I bought a set of Winsor Newton Professional Series brushes, and I like these a lot. These are pointed rounds, and so they're pretty nice. And I was using these I was using a combination of my 7 series and the reason I bought these is because there were some sizes I didn't have in my 7 series, and I wanted to fill those in with my Winsor Newton Professional brushes. And so I bought a set of these. Some of them are put away right now. Yeah, I have them put away. But anyway, I went into our art store, and so I was using these at home, and then I went to our local art store, and they were clearancing out. They had, like, in a cardboard box, a big batch of brushes they were clearancing out because they weren't going to carry them anymore. And so for about $60, I bought one for $30 because I wanted a bigger size brush, and this was a size 6 pointed round, and I didn't have that size, and I wanted it. So I bought this brush, and I brought it home, and I painted with it one time, and I fell in love immediately. It is everything. It's like there are things I like about this brush, and there are things I like about this brush, and somehow this one is all of that combined. So I immediately went back to the store and I bought some additional sizes so that I would have a nice set. And then I moved these Winsor Newton Professional brushes into my travel caddy, and this is what I paint with at home. And I, like I said, I really love them. I think they have the perfect amount of spring. So spring is, how that brush bounces back. They're nice and soft. They're very full, much fuller than the other two brushes here. and they come to a really fine point. And so like what you can do with brushes is make a comparison. Here, let me grab my, so like, I'm going to bring these up a little closer. I hope you can see them. So these are all size 5 brushes. This is a size, the far one on the left here is the Da Vinci Maestro, and it's the series 35. These are the brushes that I've fallen in love with. This is the Winsor Newton Professional brush, and this is the Winsor Newton 7 series brush. And the most expensive of these 3 brushes is this Winsor Newton 7 series. And you can just see that like this Da Vinci brush has a bigger belly, which means it holds more water and paint, but it also comes to a beautifully fine tip. Let me get it wet so that we can see how fine the tip points out to. There. You can see it's just as, yeah, I love it. And you can see that this size 5 is a lot more generous than the other 2. And so what I have for these Da Vinci brushes is a size 6, a size 5, a size 4, and then I have, this is a size 1 rigger. And so it means that it's not, it doesn't have a big belly. Instead, it's very slim, and it's for doing like fine detailed line work. I think the series of this is actually 1200K. This is not a series 35, because the series 35 are the pointed rounds. And so if you were going to purchase these, and you just want to start with a couple, you could just start with the size 6 and the size 4. And I would say in most brush series, that's what I would recommend. If these have nice big bellies, so a size 6 kind of works like a size 7 or 8 brush would in this particular line. If you were purchasing in a different line, you would probably want to purchase like a size 8 and a size 5 would be a nice like round brush. Again, these are really expensive, so if you're brand new, you might not want to go out and invest in this type of brush, but I just wanted to share with you what I paint with and why I love them so much. They just hold water. They've got the perfect amount of spring. So that what spring means is like when you're painting and you lift the brush off, they spring back to shape really well. And I have just absolutely loved working with them. Okay, so if we're not buying expensive brushes, and then the other things I use are these 2 brushes. This is a silver brush, and this is it's made by Silver Brushes. The line is called Black Velvet. These are pretty great. These would be what I would recommend if you wanted like a middle of the road brush. So you don't want to spend money on. These are all made with Kolinsky sable, and Kolinsky sable is imported from like, I don't know, it's a European sable, and it comes from like the animal, the sable, and the Winsor Newton 7 series brushes, these are actually a handmade brush. I'm not sure about the Da Vinci Maestros, but anyway, if you don't want to invest in this level of brush, then a nice middle of the road brush is the Silver Brushes, and these are I think a mix of squirrel and synthetic hair. And this is a size 14. They're really affordable. I would love to have a size like 12 in the Da Vinci Maestro, but I think that would be like $260 the last time I looked, or $250, something like that for just one brush. Whereas this brush is like $35 or $40. So you can see there's a huge difference. And so you can get a set of these. And if you were getting these, I would say get a nice big brush for big washes. A size 14 is great. And then I would add maybe a size 8 and a size 4. That you'd have, those 3 brushes could start you off pretty well. The other brush that I use a lot is this 1-inch brush. This is also made by Silver, and it's called their Alpine White. I think it's called a rake brush. I might have that name wrong. That's what I've always called it, is a rake brush. And so this is really nice for doing washes for like skies or in landscapes if you want to get a big swash of color that's nice and even across your paper. I also use this to pre-wet my paper if I'm going to do a wet on wet painting. So I really like these. This is the same. I actually, this you want to use with bigger paper, or you can use it for pre-wetting your paper. That's what I've used it for. The 2-inch, unless you're using on bigger, unless you're working a lot on bigger pages, I don't know that you need a 2-inch, but having a 1-inch is pretty convenient. And then the other brushes I wanted to talk about, if you want to go with a really inexpensive brush to get started with, these are a good investment because you can use them later. If you decide to upgrade your watercolor brushes, they're still useful for doing lifting techniques. And that's why I have them in my brush cup, is because this is what I use for lifting. And so I have a size 6. This is kind of a skinny size 6. If you were going to purchase these as your primary brushes, I would recommend an 8 round, a 4 round, and then maybe one of these angle brushes. Maybe even just if you're painting on smaller scale, then the 1/4 inch would be just fine. These are pretty stiff. They are full synthetic brushes. You can see they're pretty snappy. They don't have a big full belly, and they achieve this point, you know, it's like kind of shaved, and so that point is not quite as reliable as the point on this brush. I'm not going to be able to, this brush I'm going to be able to get really fine lines with the tip of that brush. This brush I'm not going to be able to do that. Even when it's wet and, you know, and we've got it pretty well shaped out, it's going to just be harder to get those really fine lines, because the tip is just a little less, it wants to splay out a little bit more, I guess is what I'm trying to say. But they are pretty decent brushes for being at a very affordable option. All right, so I think that's it for paint brushes. The last thing we'll talk about is paint, and I'm going to do like a really quick rundown of what I have on my table for paint, and then I'm going to do a second video that talks about colors. And so if this first set, this is a $5 set of watercolor. It is, I think, Jack Richson, or I think is the name of these, and they are semi-moist transparent watercolors. You can see that they don't get super vivid. This is just a set of 12 colors. I think you can pick this up for $6 or $7 maybe, sometimes $5. I bought it for $2.99 a very long time ago. And it's just a really basic set of colors. Something like this can get you started if you are not sure whether or not you are going to continue painting watercolor, and you just want to like just play around and see if you like it. You know, you could buy something like this, less than $10. And there are quite a few options in that range. There is even like, I know the big box stores have some bigger palettes. What you're going to find with these kinds of paints is you're not going to be able to get to be super vivid, and they are kind of chalky when they dry. And so you'll definitely be able to explore and so have some fun with them, but just understand that these are probably not going to last you very long if you decide to get serious about watercolor. All right, the next thing I wanted to share with you is a set like this. This is what I think, these kinds of sets is what I think a lot of people start with. And this is just a pre-made, you know, half pan palette. There are a lot of different companies, a lot of different brands who are making these. This is not actually the brand. I bought this to have in, it's just kind of an extra palette. I wanted to try it out, and it is good to like throw in a backpack or something like that. And so these are called half pans. They are machined and cut and then glued into these trays. That's how they get the paint in here. And this is a kind of a nice range of colors. There are 24 colors here. So if you're looking at something like this, what you want to look for is a nice range of yellows. You want some different yellow options because you want to be able to use cool and warm yellows. We'll talk about that later. And then you're going to want cool and warm reds, so a nice selection of reds. Make sure that it has a pink, at least a pink. A purple is nice to have. You don't have to have a purple if you've got nice reds and you have a good pink. But it is, you know, it's kind of convenient to have a purple on the palette. And then you're definitely going to want some blues. This palette has 4 blues and it has 4 greens. What you don't need is a bunch of greens. So for me, I would have rather have had a couple of additional blues instead of having all 4 greens here. And then you've got some neutrals. And that's the other thing. Like if they would have included an additional blue, 2 greens, and then an additional neutral, I would have been a little happier with this. Now these paints are student grade paints. They do use brighteners and they use more additives in their binder. And the pigments, like on this particular set, you can't even find pigment information. There's just some color numbers here, but there's no pigment. You can't look up to see like how many different pigments they're using to make these colors. And that means that you're not going to be able to mix reliably. Now this set was about, I think, $25. If you're going to spend $25 on a pre-filled palette like this, the one that I really like, and I don't have it on my table because I purchased it twice now, but I give it away to friends who are interested in watercolor. I've given it away twice, is Art Whale. And I will put that, I'll put a link down in the description of this video. But Art Whale is the nice thing about Artwell is they do give you pigment information. Their palette, they have a palette of 24 colors. They are half pans, and they come in like a nice metal rack so that you can rearrange that. If you want to see what that looks like. This is a metal palette with little individual half pans. This is actually a metallic palette, but and this is 12. The Artwell is 24. But this rack, this is the rack, and it comes out, right? And what's nice about this is these little half pans, you can rearrange them into whatever order you want. So I think that's kind of convenient. These aren't going to last you forever. They're going to, you know, but they're going to get you started. Okay, so these are palettes that you buy already, you know, as a palette. The next thing, and this is what I prefer, let me grab, is to purchase tubes of watercolor paint and then fill your own palette. And when you do this, you have control over, you have the most control over the colors that you're choosing. And the other thing is that you can buy a tube of paint and refill the well in that palette over and over and over again. A good example is, I think this is my cobalt blue. Actually, this is a better, this is my, this is a phthalo blue green shade. I have filled my palette wells with this probably 5 or 6 times. And because it's a color I use all the time, you can see how much paint is still in this tube. So even though I had to spend a lot more for this, I'm getting a lot for my, you know, kind of a lot of value for my dollar. First of all, it is artist grade paint, so I have really high quality pigment, a high quality binder. I don't have a lot of fillers, so my colors are going to be a lot more vivid. I'm going to get a lot of movement out of them. They're not going to muddy up when I try to mix them. I'm just going to have a lot of success. Now, I'm not telling you that if you're a beginner that you should go out and buy all professional level artist grade paints. I just want to make sure that you understand the differences between artist grade and student grade. So if you are a very beginner, one student grade paint that I really like is Van Gogh. And so when you buy these are 10 milliliter tubes, so you're going to be able to fill your pan multiple times. And Van Gogh is made by the same company. It's made by Royal Talons, the same company that makes Rembrandt. And I love Rembrandt paints. Rembrandt is an artist grade paint, and they're sold in like 20 milliliter tubes. Van Gogh is a student grade paint sold in 10 millimeter tubes. These tubes cost between $15 and $20 a piece. These tubes cost like between $3 and $5 a piece. So there's a really big difference in cost here, but this is a great way to start out. These are going to be a higher quality paint than almost anything you're going to find in these $20 palettes that you can buy online. So this is and Van Gogh does sell some pre-made palettes that are, you know, like come pre-filled, but I think that the tubes are a better value. So definitely look into this if you want to start with tube paints, but you're not ready to go to those professional paints yet. And what you can do is then start with these and then slowly replace them with professional paints the more you're painting with watercolors, and as you are further along in your journey and you want to start exploring some professional grade paints, you can. So that's a good way to go. All right, and then once I buy these tubes, I love Mijello brand palettes, because I've got 3 here. Actually, I'm going to close that over. Okay. I use this one. This one is full of Daniel Smith and Rembrandt paints, and this is 18 wells, and it has these Mijello palettes have these removable mixing trays. It makes it really easy to wash them off. And then they have a couple of additional wells in the center. This holds 18 different paints. What I like about this is it has a wider well and they're slanted down, so it's really easy for me to load up my brush with paint, and I don't feel like I'm trying to jam it in this tiny little pan. So I like these bigger pan sizes better. The downside is that you have to kind of pick carefully where you want your paints to be, because other than like scraping out the old paint, it's pretty hard to rearrange them. So you have to be a little thoughtful about how you squeeze your paint out into these wells. So that's my palette of 18. I have a travel caddy that I use for when I want to paint with friends, or sometimes I visit my dad and I bring my paints with. And so I use my travel caddy. This one goes in my travel caddy because it's smaller. Now this is a palette that if you're watching my tutorials, 9 times out of 10, this is the palette I'm painting with, and it is full of Daniel Smith and Rembrandt colors. I think I have one remaining Van Gogh color, which is a cerulean blue, because I started with some Van Gogh colors and then slowly replaced them. I started off with Rembrandt and Van Gogh colors, and then I have added in some Daniel Smith paints. I don't think that I would ever need a palette larger than 24 paints because this has everything I need and more. Like when I talked about less is more, I also have, like, I love every tube of paint in here, and so I don't feel like I need to try every brand. I'm really happy with these paints. My local art store sells Daniel Smith. They used to sell Rembrandt and they don't anymore, so as I buy new tubes of paint to replace old ones, they'll probably be Daniel Smith, just because that's what I can buy locally. And you know, when you can buy locally, you should, because then it supports our art stores that we like to visit. All right, I'm gonna talk about that set in a minute, but let me open this up. Okay, so this is the Mijello set of 24. So there's 24 wells, and it's the same thing. We have this really nice tray that comes out. The plastic itself is not cheap. It's nice, sturdy plastic. Sometimes they're like chintzy. This is not chintzy at all. And then it's got this seal in the lid to make sure that it is waterproof and leak proof, which is great if you are throwing it in a backpack. And I like how, another thing that I like is that they've got these little grooves so that as you're slopping your paint, which happens when you're, you know, if you're pulling your paint out, and these grooves collect that extra water so that it's not washing over into your other colors and dirtying them up. I also like that I have these 2 additional trays. I tend to mix my, you know, this side of my paint, so the like yellows and oranges and reds and pinks go in this side, and I tend to do my blues and greens over here. And I hardly ever wash that out. I'll wash this out for a new painting, but I kind of like to have these dirty mixes to pull from if I need something really grayed out. So, all right, so this is also made by Mijello, and this is the 24 well palette. You can get these on Amazon. And then the last thing I'm going to show you about paint is this. So like these tubes I've had to collect individually. You could just go out and buy them, of course, and fill a whole palette. But I spent a lot of time choosing colors and researching and figuring out exactly what I wanted in my palette, and that's how I ended up here. And so I really love what I have. If I could only have 24 paints for the rest of my life, these would be the 24 that I would have. But since the world doesn't work that way, this is another good option. Now, I will say that Daniel Smith and Rembrandt paints, they are more granulating and they flow fast. And what that means is when you touch them to water, they move in that water and they move across the paper. So you can get some really cool effects. It's amazing for landscapes and a loose painting style. And you know, we've got some really beautifully vivid, very heavy pigment loaded paints. This is Mission Gold, and these are the Class Pure pigments. And so this was a set of 24. I'm going to grab the box so you can see what that looks like. This set, I think, was in the $80 range, something like that, maybe $75, and it does go on sale. Hang on, my dogs might get loud here. Okay, so if you think you want to buy professional quality paints, but you just want to buy a set and you don't want to spend a ton of money, this is a good option. This is made by Mission Gold. It's actually made by Mijello, who is the same company that makes these palettes that I love. And so this Mission Gold, it is a honey-based binder, which is super cool to work with. And you pay about $70 to $80 for this set of 24, but the tubes are large. They're 15 milliliter tubes, and it's 24 tubes. What I like about this set, you can get some paperwork here, and there are all sorts of unboxing videos that you can watch about these paints, because these are, I think, fairly popular, in part because they're really affordable, and they are, this particular set of all of these gold tubes are pure pigment sets. So this means that every paint in here is made with just one pigment. They are there's a pretty heavy pigment load. They aren't filled with a bunch of like brighteners and extra additives. They're actually really high quality paints at a very good price. Now you can buy individual tubes of this, but I think the individual tubes are like $15. And if you added that all up, it would be like, I don't know, $300 or $400 to buy this. But as a set, you can get it for less than $100. Now, the thing about these paints that I think because I started with Daniel Smith and Rembrandt, I'm used to painting with those. These definitely paint very differently, which is why I wanted them. I have started doing some botanicals and some still life work that requires a lighter touch and a bit more control, and I'm doing a lot of glazing. And so that kind of painting style lends itself very well to these paints because they're really nice and transparent and they have this pure pigment. There's no mixed pigments in them. It means that I can lay layers on top of them without them getting muddy. You do have to build up darkness though. If you look here on this sheet, I swatched these out and I think you get it's easier to get a lot more pigment here just in an initial wash. These tend to wash out a bit more than my Daniel Smith and Rembrandts, and so you have to build them up. But when you're working in like florals where you want that, where you want to do a lot of glazing of layers, then this is the kind of paint that's going to work really well for that. So that's why I have this set. If I had to choose only one paint set for, like I said, the rest of my life, then this is definitely going to be it. And this set of colors, like I really, really, really love this particular collection of paints. It works very well for my painting style. Now you might find that what you prefer is different than this. And maybe, your individual color choices are going to be a bit different than this because as you develop your own style of painting and your own favorites and the things that you reach for over and over again, that's going to look probably pretty different from what I love. But this is just what has worked really well for me. So anyway, I like these paints a lot and I think they're a really good value for the money. Actually, let's open up so you can see them in the palette. They're so pretty. These are a little stickier and I think that's because it's a honey base, so they don't dry down quite as quickly or as even some of them feel like they stay sticky all the time. It hasn't been a problem. They're not moving around or anything. And so, they've painted out really well. So great set, great option for under $100 to end up with a full set of paints. And I do really love the color choice. They give you a lot of blues. They don't overload you with greens. There's only a couple of greens, which is nice. You've got a nice selection of neutral colors. You've got a really nice selection of yellows. You've got 3 reds. I think that they don't have like a carmine kind of color. I think this is the closest to it, which is permanent red deep. It would have been nice to have, actually, you've got this Quin pink is really, really nice. And the Quin violet is okay. The dioxine purple is really nice. And then you have this color here, which is a rose madder. I don't know that I feel like with quinacridone rose, I don't know that I needed rose madder, and what I would have preferred here, or even maybe here, this is like a weird bright color. I would have replaced these with like a deeper carmine red. That would be the only change that I would make from this. But it is really nice. And I've discovered like this cobalt turquoise, or it's cobalt green deep actually. Cobalt green deep, but it's very, like, it's got a lot of blue undertones. This is a really cool color to work with. I did a painting the other day where I was pulling from this a lot, and this will become kind of a favorite paint. Actually, who knows, it may ever even migrate over into my other paint palette over here. Anyway, so this is another good option. I think that's it. I think that looking at paints can be really confusing because there are so many different options and artists have a lot of preference. I definitely have my preferences. And so in some ways you can do a lot of research and you can put together your first palette, and your first palette is probably going to look it's gonna go through some changes and revisions until you get to the palette that you really enjoy using. But I think that's it. If you have not already subscribed to this channel, please subscribe. I really want to get to 500 subscribers, I've got a ways to go because I think we're at a little over 100. But once we get to that 500 number, I can open up a community tab and we'll be able to upload photos of our work as we go through tutorials and give each other feedback. And I just think it'll be really nice to be able to broaden this community. And so, you know, if you haven't subscribed, it would be great if you would. And I thank you so much for watching. Hit like if you like the video. Leave me comments if you'd like to see something more, if you would like to. I'm always open for suggestions and I love feedback. All right, I'm going to sign off for today.